questions, then you can throw them in the chat, and Kara, you can interrupt me, or we can address them all at the end too. We'll just sort of see how it goes. The way my screen is, I don't see the chat, so I can't just sort of see them as they come. So welcome to Phishing 101. I should have changed this to Phishing 101, the COVID version. If you were on our first one, we've changed it a little bit and added some more specific information around what we're seeing in the last couple of months relating to COVID and how that's changed some of the phishing attempts and what the scammers are trying to do. And as such, we're going to sort of not go through quite as many of the examples that we did maybe before. So it'll look a little bit different if this is the second time joining us. So have you ever received an email asking you to send money? Have you ever received an email asking you to update an account online, something like your password or your credit card information? Or have you ever received an email threatening some kind of action if you didn't complete a requested task? So those are often, they're generally phishing emails, right? They are trying to get information from you. So what is phishing? Wikipedia says it's the attempt to get sensitive information for malicious reasons by pretending to be a trustworthy source. So sensitive information includes usernames, passwords, and credit card details. So if you think of phishing just like what we think about going and sitting at the lake and throwing the rod and the reel, and okay, I don't fish, but you fish into the lake to catch the fish. You are the fish on the other end. The scammers are trying to get your information, and that's how you can kind of think about it. This was really interesting as I was setting up this presentation. We've been doing phishing training with our clients for, I want to say, 3 or 4 years now. And so when we first started really digging in, we found these statistics on a Government of Canada website, and they blew me away because every time I do this presentation, people say, I don't understand why they bother. So every single day, 156 million phishing emails are sent out around the globe. So 16 million of these get through spam filters, so 10%. So the good news is 90% don't. So every time you get them and you think, oh man, my spam filter isn't working, know that they're probably catching on an average, 90% of them. Those of you who have an enterprise email system like through Office 365, they will actually even catch more than 90%. Of these, 8 million are opened. Out of the 16 million, 8 million are open. If you have a preview screen, they count that as opening it. 800,000 links are clicked every single day, so 10% of what's opened, and every single day, 80,000 people fall for the scam. They share personal information, including usernames, credit card information, and passwords, resulting in stolen identities, financial loss, credit card frauds, and other internet scams. So that's a pretty good return on their investment. So they continue to do this. So we use a mnemonic. So in my past life, I was a teacher. And so we came up with this mnemonic at CompuVision about last. So think of it as the last time you'll let your guard down. And each one of those stands for something that helps you identify that it is a phishing email. So the first one is the link. So if we hover over a link, and I will show you how to do that, it will show you where it really goes. And generally, it will go somewhere in a phishing email. It will go somewhere other than where they're telling you it's going to go. So the other is some people look at the return address. Because this can be spoofed, I worry about telling people to do this. You can look at the return address, and if it's obvious, then you know it's not right, but don't think it's okay just because it looks like it came from a legitimate source. I also look at how is it addressed. Relevant companies have your name and they have your information. They're not going to say, dear sir or madam, dear email address, right? Your bank knows who you are. Your credit card company knows who you are. Spelling and grammar. So when we first started doing this a few years ago, the spelling and grammar was quite atrocious in a lot of these emails. They've refined them immensely over the last few years, so we don't see this as big of a leading indicator, but certainly if you see it, you know it's going to be a phishing email. Companies like Apple and our banks have whole departments that are dedicated to putting out quality communication, and there's no way that they're going to send out emails that look poor or that have spelling and grammar errors. There will be an inherent threat or promise, and sometimes it's subdued and it's hidden a little bit. Do this so that we can refund your money, but that's still the threat. If you don't do this, we're holding on to this money. So just want to show you a couple examples of what we've been doing. So this was one that we got a little bit while ago. So David always sends them to me. So this is what it came in looking like, right? It looks like it came from Office 365. Your David B at compuvision is 25 gigs over your storage limit. So if you're looking at the return address, this one is very obviously not from Microsoft. So you can stop there. What they're saying is clean up the files or get more storage. So if I hover over this, do you see how there's a little pop-up there? And so it says it goes to procallcenter.sn. And so in one of my sessions I was doing this, somebody looked up SN, and what that is, that's Senegal. So we can tell that this is a phishing email, it's a scam. And so both of them lead me to the same place as well. It's another one that was, right? It shows dear customer that they can't return or they can't deliver a package as expected. So they're going to return it to the sender unless you send in this information. Now, if you look here, I can't hover over this link. If I click in here, you can see how it's brought up a dotted box. And what that shows me is that this is a picture that they've inserted. So what that does is it gets around the email or the link in the email. So a lot of the spam filters are catching these emails, and they can tell when the link leads to a place that it doesn't say, and so it will block that, and it will say, no, this is a scam. And even lately, I've been getting Office 365, and it will say, I know it's a phishing email that's come in, but it will say external. So what they've done is they're trying to spoof somebody else's internal email address, but Office 365 has picked up that it isn't in fact an internal, and they've written external so that it's really obvious that it is a scam. So Office 365 has done a fabulous job of working to. So what they've done is they've stuck in a picture. I've seen this as well where they've done a picture, and at the bottom they've put actual links to the Canada Post website, so that if you click that, it does take you to the Canada Post website to help you trick you into believing that it is legitimate, right? So what they're saying is they're banking on that if you can't click this, right, that you'll open this HTML file, which leads you to a form to enter your personal information. And so what's really, I don't know if it's funny or if it's good, it's probably a little bit of both, is I got this, and I have a few of our techs who work at compuvision who are really into phishing. And so I forward them on these, and I say, okay, so help me understand how I can teach this, right? And so they actually opened up the HTML file, they entered fake information and hit submit, and right away, within 5 or 10 minutes, they had a couple of the people who monitor our internal network saying, you entered information on a fraudulent site, and so it was caught right away, which I thought was actually really, really good in terms of our security. And he's like, no, it's okay, because he goes, I was just entering false information to test it out, but that was good. So this is another one that I've seen often, and so they've gotten into it. Says, please advise on the attached and forward a copy of any outstanding invoices so we can settle our accounts. And so when I taught junior high, and I taught a little bit of math, and one of the questions I always asked was, when you do the equation, look at the answer and say, does the answer make sense? And with phishing emails, I think that's probably one of the best questions you can ask. Say, does this make sense? So when I'm looking at this, I said, do I know Gail Barrington? I don't. I've had no dealings with her, right? If you open up this attachment, then there will be a link in that attachment. And lots of times they embed the links in the attachments because they can get past the spam filters. So what they're doing is trying to get in there, and then they're getting your information because they're saying, oh, like they're banking on big companies not knowing that they haven't done their business with this woman. So I looked at her, and I looked her up. So I said, okay, is there a Gail Valence Barrington? And there is a Barrington Research Group. She is like the CEO. That is the correct phone number. That is the correct URL. when I'm doing that, I'm searching, I'm opening up a new browser and I'm searching. I'm not just clicking this because it's absolutely going to take me to what looks like a real website. So I ended up phoning her and saying, this is going to sound really weird, but I think your email has been compromised because I received an email from you. And she actually said that she'd received several phone calls about that. So that was made me kind of happy that people were getting back to her and saying, hey, I think your email has been compromised. So what I think I'm just going to do is go back to our presentation and make sure that we have our examples. So here's what we're seeing pre-COVID, and you were still seeing some of these type of examples today. So emails are looking more and more realistic every day. They're able to pull images off websites and create what looks like legitimate emails rather than ones that look like small children put them together. So sometimes they'll use real links to a website to make them appear legitimate. They'll say, okay, here's our link to a privacy policy, and it'll take you to the actual privacy policy. And I've seen this one with the Canada Post scams. So I thought that was really interesting. They may have an old password. So there's one that goes around every so often that says, I know your password. And generally it also says, I have you on the webcam and I know what you've been watching and I'm going to show everyone. So what they've done is, as websites get compromised, the information from usernames and passwords gets posted and sold off. And so these scammers will get access to that. They know most usernames are your email, is your email address, which is why banks often don't use your email address as because then it's easy if they have control to reset the password. So they may have an old password and threaten you. So it's really important that you have different passwords for different websites, that you have secure passwords. Sometimes they'll use a photo of an email in the body, like that Canada Post one that I shared. They'll embed links in attachments to get by the spam filters. And what we're seeing is, I think a few years ago, we saw a ton of targeting at the finance department. They were asking for CFOs to send money. And what we're seeing now is, in addition to that, a movement to targeting HR. And what they're saying is, it'll look like it came from either somebody in HR or maybe a payroll processor, and saying, please make sure that we have an up-to-date information on all these employees. And it will be a file where they're asking for dates of birth, names, and social insurance numbers. So it's really, really important in HR that there's some kind of confirmation that that stuff isn't sent by email ever, because that's a huge, huge privacy and security breach. What does phishing look like during COVID-19? We've seen a bunch of different themes on what kind of I've already shared with you. But according to KnowBe4, which is a security company, and we use quite often, and they will actually send out simulated phishing emails to see who in your company clicks them. According to them, phishing attacks related to COVID have increased 600% in the first quarter of 2020. And emails are truly preying on the vulnerability around COVID. So we had one client who received an email saying, your coworkers tested positive, so click this and fill in your information in order to get tested. They knew her name and they knew what company she worked for, which isn't surprising because that information is often readily available through our social sites like LinkedIn. And people will have where they work on their Facebook, so they can target that kind of stuff. And they're targeting the vulnerability and the fear around this global pandemic. So it's really important to stay vigilant. We talk about our people are our biggest assets and our people are our biggest vulnerabilities. And so there are lots of hacking. There's certainly hacking attempts that go on, but lots of times they're targeting people because people can be our weakness, and especially as they are working from home and they are lacking the social support that they may have if they're in an office, they're alone, they're feeling really maybe overwhelmed, and so they just aren't maybe thinking as critically as they might if they were sitting in their desk at their office. So people are on edge, critical thinking can be compromised. So again, when you open it, just say, does this make sense? If the scammers are sitting in your email, if they've gotten access to your emails, oftentimes they will sit and wait and wait and wait. They learn about you and then they'll insert themselves. And so you may be in the middle of a conversation with a vendor, and then all of a sudden there'll be an ask that comes out of it. And so you just need to say, does this make sense? Does this ask make sense? And maybe even phone them and confirm them. We've seen, there was one example where a client told me a story about how their CEO was going on holidays, and the scammers had access to his email for a while, and then they it was a client of a client, I think. So then they went on holidays, and an email came to the CFO saying, hi, I set up this new business arrangement. Can you please pay this company? Here's the information. And the CFO thought, well, okay, I guess he's away and I don't want to disappoint him. And so he did. And then the banks caught it and said, I don't think so. And they stopped payment on it. And then an email came in the next day looking like it came from the CEO saying, I saw that the bank caught that. Can you please make sure, can you phone them and override it and please make sure it goes through today? So one of the things that they will do is if they get into your email, they'll often set up a forward to an external address. And so we've been working on systems to disable that within Office 365 to really protect our clients as much as possible. So due to social networking and availability of information on the internet, scammers can target you. So they find out where you work from LinkedIn. Once they figure out what the email standard is, then they can, and your name, whether it's your first initial dot last name or first name last name, once they figure that out, then they can target people within a company. So some common phishing emails claim to come from the Center of Disease Control, and they're warning about cases. Again, they're preying on fear and vulnerability. Some of them are targeting vulnerabilities related to working from home. Subjects like they'll say rescheduled meetings and SharePoint, Teams, Zoom, VPN connections are working from home, right? Because people aren't used to that. They are a little bit more now, but certainly in the beginning they weren't used to working from home, and so there may be some confusion about how things work. And then again, the example that I mentioned earlier about the colleague at their company, which they'd named the colleague and tested, they named the company and said somebody had tested positive. So luckily the security protocol had disabled the macro embedded in the email, which is great. So our security is getting better and better, but it's just sort of an ongoing cat and mouse game sometimes. New websites are emerging that contain malware, which exploit vulnerabilities in Flash, Java, and Adobe PDF. So ensure your browsers are also up to date and that you're visiting secure websites. Online retailers are popping up offering cures and testing, immune system boosting products which are fraudulent. And so the same as the old snake oil salesman that went door to door, now they're showing up on the internet as well. And they're trying to exploit personal information as well. All right, because once they have your name and credit card number, they can then use that to scam. They're targeting medical offices, hoping to get access to patient files, and then they can email worried patients, right? And they can target patients who are, we are all worried about COVID-19. And there's been phishing attempts using named and spoofed domains of health agencies. So they're pretending to be a legitimate health agency and emailing. So we have several different blog posts up that go into some of that stuff related to COVID a little bit more in detail. And so we will send you a link, or Kara's going to send you a link with these slides, and in there will be the links to these 4 articles that you can read. We've put up on our resources pages and on our connections blog. One of the really important things to talk about when we're talking about phishing is best practices and processes. And as a company or organization, you need to sit down and have this conversation with your probably your executive team. So I was in one client doing this presentation, and the CFO said, we have a rule that we don't ever talk about money on email. And so that if anyone gets an email, they know it's a scam, that we believe that it is essential we have those conversations as face-to-face conversations, which I thought was really fabulous. So whether it is, if there's 2 people to sign a check, that 2 people have to make any kind of changes, or there has to be a double check before you make changes. So I think most people may remember the attempt, the phishing that happened with Grant McEwen several years ago. And it was to the tune of several $1 million. I can't remember now. But what had happened is there was a scammer that was sitting in a vendor's email, and they knew that it was about time to get paid. And so then they sent an email to Grant McEwen saying, hi, we've updated our account information. Please change it in your system. And they did, so that when they went to pay that vendor, they were paying the scammer instead. So it's really easy to sort of get caught up, especially because you may be in the middle of a conversation that goes back and forth before the scammer inserts themselves into it, and so you're already thinking, you're kind of complacent and you're thinking everything is okay. So for those changes, what I would suggest is that you pick up the phone and phone that other person on the other end and say, hey, I just want to confirm that you want me to do this, right? So that you take it out of email and into another arena, whether it's you walk across the hall because they're in your office, or you pick up the phone, what have you. And then I would suggest that you use the phone number that you have, not the one that they've inserted into the email, because that may lead back to the scammer. So create rules about how you address financial information or transactions. So things like only in person, or 2 people approve payments and changes, that you maybe phone to follow up. My texts tell me that if you have 2-factor identification, that Teams is very secure. So that is a much better way to have conversations back and forth within your organization. That you don't share sensitive information via email ever. That you use different passwords, make them really strong passwords. Something I hadn't talked about is a password manager, which I think is almost essential now. I know a lot of the techs at CompuVision use LastPass. I think 1Password is another one that is also really good. And the concept behind that is you remember one complicated master password, and then it keeps track of all the other ones, and they're very they're safe. They're all encrypted, and so you go to, and they will often even generate a strong password, so that enables you to keep a different password for every website. Because the problem is, if they get access to one website and they know your username and password, then they may try and use that on other websites. They're going to go to things like PayPal. They're going to go to things like maybe eBay and hope that your credit card information is saved in there. So they use that information to try and pull sensitive information and your financial records from others, from other websites. So I sent this slide deck to one of our techs who does this presentation with me often, and I said, hey, what would you add? And he typed in enable 2-factor identification everywhere you can. So he is a big proponent of 2-factor identification, and I think we're going to see that over the next few years become much more standard. And Office 365 is starting to identify emails that originate from an external domain to help identify these scams, which is really great, because in the subject line, it actually says external in big bold letters, that you know that this is not, it looks like it came from an internal source, but it is external. So we've put together a few little resources, which Kara is also going to include in the follow-up email, about tips to help you prepare for criminal cyber attacks. So beware of phishing emails, beware of any emails asking for personal information. Most reputable companies, and you hear it from the banks all the time, saying, we will not phone you and ask you for your password. We will not email you and ask you for your password. So what most of these companies will do, because they know of these scams, they will say, please go to your website, please go and log into your account and change your password. And so that you can launch your own browser, go to the PayPal site or the banking site, and log in yourself. So they do not want to send you to a link. They'll keep personal and work devices separate. Oftentimes our personal devices do not have the same level of security as set up by our network and our IT. Keep your antivirus software updated, and update your secure remote desktop protocol and remote access system. So you really want to make sure that everything is as secure and up to date as possible. There's 5 remote access risks that you need to know from working from home. And so there's a little bit more information about using a VPN, data backups, service limitations, privacy, and a lack of education. This is our little card that we use, our last time. Think about the last time you let your guard down. So the link, address, the spelling and grammar, and a threat or promise. We have some upcoming training next week. Our wonderful Brandon is going to do some scheduling assistance. So Findtime, and if you've never used Findtime, it will revolutionize your life. So I highly suggest coming back and listening to Brandon. I can't wait for that one. And also Calendly. And then on May 20th, we're going to look at OneNote. For those of you who did our OneNote, the feedback was we'd like to know how it integrates with SharePoint and OneDrive, and how do we collaborate using OneNote. So we're going to look at including all that information about how to actively use OneNote. So I'm just going to stop sharing and then see if there's anything that I can see if I can stop sharing. Share.
Great, Jackie.
That's great. So I can't stop sharing. I don't know. Oh no, I did.
It's
okay.
Good. Yeah.
So I don't know if there are any questions. We're happy to hang out for a few minutes. I can try and answer questions. I know I have some of my other colleagues who see this on a daily basis and can answer some of the technical questions as well. So just throw them in the chat. And otherwise, thank you for joining us today. And we are excited to hope that you joined us, and hopefully we'll see you again in the upcoming weeks. You have anything, Kara?
Yeah, so I've got everything I need. I'm just going to turn the camera off. If you do have a question for Jackie, we're here and you can unmute yourself and ask it or put it in the chat.
Yeah. Where the Beck's nest if you think it's a phishing email? Oh, okay, that's an excellent question, Christian. So what we tell, and I usually do this. This is usually an hour presentation that I added extra stuff in and crammed into half an hour, so I had to cut some stuff out. But if you think that it's, if you think you have a phishing email, you can forward it on to us. If you, and I should show you, but there's a forward when you go into your email. Maybe I'll just show you. If you can click, let me see if I can do this. Usually on my other computer. So under more, if you click, okay, there's a forward as attachment under more. This one's set up differently. So there's a forward as attachment, and that keeps all the headers and the techie stuff that our techs look at, because they can trace back where it actually came from, and did it come from the domain that it said it came from, and where was it rooted. So you can forward it as attachment. Otherwise, you can delete it. We can try and blacklist them, except there's a new email and a new domain. It's tough to keep up with. So and what I would say is to any of our clients, if you think you've compromised somehow, let us know right away. Don't worry about it and have all those restless nights not sleeping. Let us fix it. That's why we're here. Would you have anything to add to that, Brandon?
No, I would just say to be vigilant. I have gone a very long time without ever feeling like I did something wrong. And about a month and a half ago, a weird email came in. I was expecting to hear from this organization, but like just the wording and stuff didn't make sense. And I had opened the PDF that said it was like a new business opportunity, and I just had this sinking feeling like, oh, Jackie is going to make so much fun of me. And so I reached out to our own service desk right away, and I was like, guys, I think I messed up. I need some help. And one of our techs remoted in and checked it out, and he said, no, this is fine. They just misspelled some words. Everything's good. And I was like, oh, thank goodness. But even though I was super embarrassed, I was just like, I need to tell someone. I need to tell an adult right away so that someone can check it for me. So just do that. Don't let your ego get in the way.
Yeah, for sure. And that's why we're here. We don't want you to be worried about that.
I also just want to note, Kristen, or Christian, I'm not sure. I just want to, that you were one of the ones that came in a bit later, and I apologize for that. But there is a last phishing slide that also has some next steps for you to just check that you'll be receiving via your email.
Perfect. Thanks, Kara. Were there any other? Bobby, thank you for putting seminars. Oh, yeah, thank you, Bobby. That's very nice. Were there any other questions or